Void Stranger EX Story Recap and Analysis serves as a supplement to my two prior Void Stranger recap videos, which covered the first two acts of Gray and Lily, and the next two acts as Sif and Lev, respectively. In this video, I'll discuss the lore of the EX DLC expansion that shipped in the 1.1.0 release of Void Stranger, and as usual, spoilers abound, so I recommend you play it yourself first before returning to watch this video. That being said, let's get started. Theming. EX is strongly themed around the Mimic, the Void agent associated with Void Lord Sif, the artificial Manusya. The new terrific four-layered music of the EX expansion is heavily reminiscent of Lax's Lullaby, which is the music associated with the Mimic area of the base game. And Mimics play key roles throughout. Mimics were the gateway to finding the bonus content via community collaboration, where many folks with completed save files of the base game could encounter a random Mimic that offered one pixel of the EX brand, and by combining all of them with dozens of others, reveals the whole brand itself. Talking to Mimics always revealed the early true nature of the player, and so the new Mimic portrait foreshadowed the fact that the player themselves is a Mimic in this go-round. That foreshadowing continued as one of the final puzzles required sacrificing each enemy agent to the Void, with the last one being sacrificed being you, rather than a Mimic. More foreshadowing occurs if the player tried to escape via Gore's brand, but gets blocked by game crashes whenever a Mimic dies, or gets blocked by Mon explicitly calling the player a Mimic before killing them. And finally, after resting at the final tree, the one who awakens at the tree is revealed to be a Mimic. Setting. Also noteworthy, rather than the typical brains labeled like B001, EX takes place in Elysium, a conception of ancient Greek afterlife where godlike, heroic, or righteous persons would go after death, vaguely akin to a heaven. And EX itself is a Latin or Greek prefix meaning out, or away, or forth. And as we'll see, all the various story endings in EX have a note of finality to them, and the EX name reinforces that theme throughout. Is Elysium an actual place in the DIS computer simulation? Or did the Mimic dream it all? We do witness B and Sif on E?" in the main ending, and Sif is not wearing glasses, suggesting it might be a real place in the Act 3 timeline, after the Lilies escaped Void together and after Sif saved B. But Mimic Gray also sees Mon when trying to escape via a shortcut, and Sif would have already killed Mon in that timeline. So I'm not sure that EX really admits a fully coherent time and place to exist among the main story campaign's already convoluted timelines. But that's fine. There's also a feeling of fan service to the whole EX expansion. The developers are giving the fans more of what they crave, namely, more challenging puzzles, more cryptic lore, and just leaving us all asking more questions and imagining new interpretations for this final work of Void Stranger art. Story. Despite playing as a Mimic, an automaton, this is not an emotionless story. Sif designed Mimics to mirror their targets perfectly, and as a Mimic targeting Gray, a person with plenty of tragic backstory, there's still ample opportunity for hard-hitting emotional moments that caused me to break into tears on camera during my playthrough on multiple occasions. So GG once again to the System Eraser developers for some 11 out of 10 storytelling. That said, the EX content is mostly puzzles, the most difficult of the game, divided into 4 main branches for a player who is first burdenless, then has the sword, then also has the wings, and finally gets Void Memory, and each of those 4 branches has its own music variation. As a result, the expansion first seems like an innocuous puzzle pack with some great puzzles for dedicated veterans to fully explore the limits of the game's mechanics. But after lulling the sokoban enthusiast into a false complacency, thinking that this expansion might just be devoid of lore, EX takes a hard turn near the end and offers the player not just one story ending, but perhaps 6, depending upon exactly how you choose to count things. In no particular order, the various story endings include the Carcass ending, where we witness a conversation between Lev and Yus explaining the origin of the strange riddles that we've witnessed in fragile memories scattered throughout the base game. The main tree ending, where the mimic Asgray dreams of a happy family life that could have been if not for cruel fate. The womb ending, where after trying to escape with our own personal brand, we get to experience the weird nothingness that comes after an unbirth. The failed mimic escapes, where either mimic deaths in the Brain 160s kills us, or Merchant Mon kills us if we try to use the secret shortcut to bypass those areas. The trailer ending, where a secret passage past the tree leads to the sokoban puzzles originally seen in the original game trailer, ending in the impossible 23 rock puzzle. And finally, the impossible ending, which I myself did not get, where if the player uses glitches or cheats to win the impossible 23 rock room, they end up meeting Judge Zero standing in as the developer system erasure for a one-on-one talk about how this really is the end, but they hope to see us again in future games, and we should remember this longing. That's a hefty amount of lore content to dump at the end of an otherwise puzzle-heavy expansion, and I shall briefly recap each ending and analyze some of the less obvious aspects contained within them. Trailer ending. Way back in the year 2020, System Erasure posted the reveal trailer for Void Stranger, and in that video there were some puzzle screens shown, including 7 in a row, whose floor tile geometry spelled out sokoban, suggesting the nature of the gameplay of this upcoming game. 4 years later, EX finally makes those puzzles from the trailer available as gameplay puzzles for the player. The player can enter this secret area by bypassing the tree that leads to the main sleeping mimic ending, and instead falling into Void where the stairs past the tree should be. The most noteworthy story aspect of the puzzles in this zone are the fact that 4 of the rock eggs in this zone have atypical speaking dialogue. In particular, they quote 4 conversations the player would have seen way back in the main game campaign. The first: "How about we jump the ship and run away, just you and me, so we can do whatever we like, go wherever. What's holding us?" These are lines spoken by Princess Lily to Gray in the first dream sequence, which I saw all the way back in episode 2 of my playthrough, which was now like 9 months ago. Lily wants to escape to a new life. Then there's a rock that says, "We'll manage, though it'll require some serious work. Still, this one feels right." And those were words spoken by Gray over the phone to Freya in Modern Lily's Dream Number 2, which I saw in my episode 38. Gray here is starting a new life. Next, a rock says, "Sigh, I'm just so tired." And these words were originally spoken by Gore to an out-of-locust Sif. In their conversation that I witnessed in episode 61, Gore wants to move on from this life. And finally, "You're almost there. No matter how difficult things might get, I believe in you. Don't give up." And these are words originally spoken by the Spirit of Use to Lily after Lily fails the shoot-'em-up, which I saw in episode 94. Use is in a new life, watching over from the sacred stars. And so I had to ask myself, why were these specific 4 quotations chosen? The speakers are in 4 stages of life: child Lily, adult Gray, old Gore, and afterlife Use. And with some searching, I discovered asrama, the 4 stages of Hindu life, in which one pursues purushartha, the 4 main goals. The 4 speakers represent characters in 4 stages of life, but ironically, who are somewhat antithetical to the proper goals of a happy life. Lily rejects her duties as princess and behaves as an insufferable imp. Gray has no wealth and can barely afford payments on a house in disrepair. Gore is a joyless, emotionless creature who seeks death rather than enjoying life. And Use was struck down as a traitor based on an unknown alleged sin. And so I imagine these quotations were chosen to illustrate how the tragic stories of these characters are as a result of their failures to follow Purushartha in the 4 asrama stages. And I like how this interpretation lends itself to concepts that are adjacent to the Hindu-Buddhist topics that I discussed previously in my Void Stranger Samsara video. That said, I am interested to hear if other folks have different thoughts on why these 4 quotations from the main game were the ones chosen to reappear here to be spoken by these rock eggs. Let me know what you think. Impossible ending. The trailer ending finishes in an impossible-to-solve room with 23 rocks. 23 is a recurring number of note, by the way, as Ad's basement with void memory was on Brain 23. Sif's hidden brand room was on Brain 223. There were 23 tiles in Use's brand. You had to bonk the Lorne idol 23 times to be able to kill Tail. And bumping the womb more than 23 times caused a game crash. So 23 rocks seems to reinforce the joke ending here, as all the rocks offer words of encouragement like, "You can do it," while the background music is Dancing Infinity, goading the player into toiling endlessly in this unsolvable puzzle room. However, if the player arrives here with the upgraded Void Rod, either by using cheats or mods or glitches, then the room becomes solvable, and solving it leads to a cutscene with Judge Zero, the stand-in for the game developer's system erasure. There's a short scene where Zero says that they thought the last room was impossible, but they also expected someone to solve it anyway, which is why they're here waiting for us. This world has reached its limit. It's time for something new. It may take a while, but I hope to see you there. So until then, are the words spoken by Zero before the helmet breaks and the player is forced to close the game, revealing the banner text, "Remember this longing." It's a fitting end for a player who has solved every possible puzzle, including the impossible one, and also a nice bookend to the Void Court that always opens with Dante's "We have no hope, yet we live in longing." I'm sure many dedicated fans will live in longing for System Erasure's next game, whatever and whenever it may be. Womb ending. The womb ending, I don't have much to say about this. You crawl inside, search around in empty blackness for an eternity, and then, having forgotten everything, have a weird conversation that communicates your fear of the unknown or of the end. Kind of like the voided ending for Gray, this one didn't land for me emotionally, but I've heard other folks react more to this ending. Mimic escape endings. The clever player will realize that they can rearrange the EX brand into Gore's brand and use it to escape from Elysium back into the normal brains, specifically return to B162. But on B167, there is a mimic that you cannot pass, and if you kill it, the game, or dream, crashes, and when you restart, you're right back in EX. However, being clever, the obvious thing to try is to bypass B167 by taking the Mon hinted shortcut on B163, but doing so reveals that Mon is there and stops you by looking you in the eye and zapping you with their gold laser beam. And Mon can also see through this gray-appearing character to realize that it is actually a mimic. These sequences reinforce the mimic theme, and concurrently box the player in to keep them from truly escaping Elysium, while simultaneously rewarding the player for their clever attempt to escape by giving them some more bonus content. If I ever get around to making a video about the art in Void Stranger, the Mon scene here is one of a few scenes that's ripped very directly from Link's Awakening, by the way. Tree ending. As for the main ending, the tree ending, I like to imagine that this is perhaps a recurring dream, or maybe nightmare, that Gray might have had after returning to Earth with the baby. If only she could have taken them both back from Void. They could have been a normal, happy family, away from the dangers and duties of the kingdom. They could have all lived happily ever after, but cruel fate put that ending out of reach. And the sense of loss for this imagined life is so great that it causes not only Gray, but also a mimic that thinks it is Gray, to weep over that loss. And the player, too. I shed tears when first witnessing this scene, and my eyes are wet once again as I'm writing this script some 2 months after that. The epic finale music of O Fortuna and its lyrics fit the moment well, as I discussed previously in episodes 126 and 127. And notably, a single tree on a hill appears in the opening stage of the developer's previous game, Zero Ranger. So repeating that tree on a hill motif at the end of Void Stranger bookends the two games, just as O Fortuna bookends Carmina Burana. The broken down mimic serves as a topic for a final conversation between Bee and Sif. There's both a sense of Sif being resigned to their fate, continuing Ad's work toiling endlessly in Dis, as well as a note of hope that, if even a mimic doll can shed tears of sorrow, then perhaps there is enough humanity in an artificial Manusia for their own enlightened escape from this place, eventually. This ending, as perhaps the most central or main ending of EX, also has the most finality, as Sif's last words are, "It's time to move on," which double as words from the game developers to the player. Carcass ending. As in the main game, the Carcass ending is one of the most mysterious, providing an apparent glimpse back in time to the research scientist before the Dark Comet Lilith attack. We witness the scientists associated with Lev and Yus having a conversation. Lev has been identified previously in the main game's Carcass ending as Dr. Lily, who had broken off on her own to study the black box data. Yus is identified by process of elimination from the scientist's photo, and the fact that his talk sound is the same as Tails' talk sound, and indeed, he even wears his hair in a pony tail. We witness the conversation from the back. Is the observer eavesdropping? Is this security camera footage while the two had stepped outside for a smoke break? As with Gray's conversation with Johan back in Act 1 that was filmed through a window, the framing of this scene gives the viewer a sense of seeing something that is not meant to be public. And, like Gray's conversation with Johan, it suggests a flirtatious prelude to an affair. It has been implied through rock egg lore that Ad and Yus were together, and story parallelism suggests that the same may have been true of their scientist counterparts. Yet here, Yus is actively flirting with Lev, and identified as the one asking the riddles that we witnessed in ephemeral conversation bubbles that could appear throughout the main game. In episode 119, I already spent a bit of time discussing the topic of drawing your own conclusions rather than being handed answers to a mystery, so I won't repeat myself here. It is perhaps noteworthy that when asked about meeting God, scientist Lev says that she would rather tell them to shove it and go to hell. If Ad did end up becoming a god after whatever catastrophe befell the research station, indeed, Ad did end up shoving it and going to hell, returning to Void. After the scene ends, the new title screen suggests Lev did end up meeting Yus for a drink, and this is perhaps the earliest known event in the Void Stranger timeline. And one could imagine it's one of the most critical events to how the whole story ends up playing out. Or not. Draw your own conclusions, he said with a grin. Are these videos ending? That sums up the various EX endings. It's time to move on. At this point, I've spent hundreds of hours making Void Stranger videos, and so Sif's words resonate especially with me. While we have reached the end of the Void Stranger story, I do still have notes and partial scripts for a couple more of these videos. So if I find the time and the motivation, there may be more videos eventually in this playlist, so check back in a while. But there are a number of other games I would like to play this summer, and this game has consumed my life for the better part of a year now, so I know it's healthy for me to move on. If you've enjoyed these videos, I have enabled the Super Thanks button on YouTube, so I invite you to click that button and send me a few bucks if you are so inclined. This masterpiece of a game will stick with me endlessly, so thanks for joining me on the roller coaster that was Void Stranger. I am Dr. Brian Lorgon 111, and I hope you're having a great day.